Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in history when a single discovery changes the course of war and reveals, in a flash, why one side has been losing a battle it could not even see. Let us travel back to the dark and stormy waters of the Atlantic during the Second World War. The German U-boats, sleek, silent predators, once ruled the seas. They hunted Allied convoys with deadly precision. Britain trembled as merchant ships burned. It seemed the U-boat menace could not be stopped. And then, something changed. One by one, those once invisible submarines began to vanish. Missions ended in silence. Proud crews never returned. The Atlantic, which had been the graveyard of Allied ships, became instead the graveyard of German submarines. The admirals of the Kriegsmarine were baffled. How could this happen? How could the Allies find their submarines in the vast Black Ocean? Then came the moment of revelation. A German raiding party captured a British bomber that had crashed on the French coast. Inside, they found a strange device. A metal box with knobs, dials, and a spinning screen. It was a radar set. When the German admirals examined it, realization struck them like lightning. This was the secret. The Allies could now see what no human eye could see. Radar waves could detect the faint reflection of a periscope, the shadow of a conning tower, the ghostly outline of a U-boat surfacing in the night. The ocean was no longer their hiding place. It was a spotlighted stage. In that moment, the German admirals understood the truth. Their mighty submarines had not been cursed, nor betrayed. They had simply been found. This discovery marked a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. Technology had outmatched courage, science had shifted the tide of war. It was proof that battles are not won by strength alone, but by knowledge, by innovation, and by the ability to see what others cannot. Ladies and gentlemen, this story reminds us that every advantage we enjoy today, in peace or in conflict, comes from understanding the unseen. The radar that once guided bombers now guides planes safely home. The same principle that once found submarines now drives weather prediction, navigation, even our smartphones. So let us remember, progress often begins with a moment of revelation, a moment when someone somewhere looks at a strange device and finally understands why the world has changed. Thank you. In the early years of the Second World War, the German U-boat fleet reigned supreme across the Atlantic Ocean. These steel predators prowled the deep, unseen and unstoppable, striking fear into the hearts of Allied sailors. Each night, the Atlantic became a hunting ground where German submarines stalked convoys carrying vital supplies to Britain. The Wolfpack tactics, groups of U-boats coordinating their attacks, proved devastatingly effective. For a time, it seemed as though the Kriegsmarine had found an invincible weapon, one capable of strangling Britain's lifeline and forcing the Allies to their knees. But by 1943, something extraordinary happened. The tide of war, which had once favored the Germans, began to turn, not through sheer numbers or luck, but through an invisible weapon born of scientific ingenuity: radar. At first, the German admirals could not understand what was happening. Their submarines, which had survived hundreds of patrols, suddenly began disappearing. Crews reported that Allied aircraft were appearing out of nowhere, striking with precision even on the darkest nights. U-boats were being bombed before they could dive, destroyed on the surface by planes that seemed to see through the darkness. The Germans were bewildered. Had the Allies discovered a new form of intelligence, some secret network of spies, or perhaps even a mysterious supernatural advantage? The truth was far more rational and far more revolutionary. The British had developed a new technology called radar, short for radio detection and ranging. It was a system that used radio waves to detect objects far beyond the range of human sight. By sending out pulses of radio energy and measuring the time it took for them to bounce back, radar could reveal the location, distance, and even the speed of an object, whether it was a ship, a submarine periscope, or an incoming aircraft. For the Allies, radar became a pair of eyes in the dark. It transformed the night sky and the open ocean into a world that could be seen through invisible waves. For the Germans, however, it was an unseen enemy, one they didn't even know existed until it was too late. The turning point came when German forces recovered the wreckage of a downed British bomber on the French coast. Inside, engineers found a strange electronic device, a box filled with circuits, vacuum tubes, and a rotating antenna. When German scientists examined it, they were stunned. This was not an ordinary communication system, it was a radar set. For the first time, the German Admiralty realized the magnitude of their disadvantage. They had been fighting blind against an opponent who could see everything. This discovery sent shockwaves through the German naval command. The admirals, once confident in the stealth and superiority of their U-boats, suddenly understood the grim truth. The Allies' ability to locate and destroy submarines in the vast Atlantic was not due to luck or chance. It was because radar had made the invisible visible. The ocean, once their greatest ally, had betrayed them. Radar had revolutionized the Battle of the Atlantic. Allied aircraft equipped with radar could now patrol thousands of square miles of ocean, scanning for the slightest sign of a submarine. Even a periscope protruding from the water, which once made the U-boat nearly undetectable, could now reflect radar waves and give away its position. Convoys could be rerouted away from danger zones, and warships could respond faster to threats. The hunter had become the hunted. The effect on morale was enormous. For the German U-boat crews, every mission became a descent into uncertainty and fear. They could no longer trust the cover of darkness. The night skies that once sheltered them had turned hostile, filled with unseen eyes that tracked their every move. Many submariners described the eerie feeling of being watched, of knowing that death could strike from above without warning. Meanwhile, on the Allied side, radar gave new confidence and coordination. Pilots flying long-range patrols with the Royal Air Force's Coastal Command began to score decisive victories against U-boats. The number of successful Allied attacks increased dramatically. The so-called Black May of 1943 saw the destruction of 41 German submarines in a single month, a catastrophic loss that forced Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, to withdraw many of his boats from the Atlantic. Technology had done what brute force could not. It had shifted the balance of power in the oceans. The radar was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not fire bullets or drop bombs, but it changed the entire strategy of naval warfare. It gave commanders information, and in war, information is often the deadliest weapon of all. The German attempt to counter this new threat came too late. They developed radar detectors such as the Metox receiver, designed to pick up radar signals from Allied aircraft. For a short time, it gave them a warning edge. But the Allies soon advanced further, introducing radar systems operating on shorter wavelengths that the German detectors could not pick up. Once again, science leapt ahead of defense. The story of radar in the Battle of the Atlantic is a testament to the power of human ingenuity. It shows how the laboratory can be as decisive as the battlefield, and how the quiet work of scientists can alter the fate of nations. The discovery of radar did more than just help the Allies win the war. It marked the dawn of a new era of technological warfare, where success depended as much on innovation as on courage. When the German admirals examined that captured radar set, they saw more than just a machine. They saw the reason their submarines were dying, the explanation for their losses, and the future of warfare itself. They realized that technology had turned the tide, that no matter how brave their sailors or how strong their ships, victory would belong to those who mastered the invisible forces of science. And so, in that moment of revelation, the proud commanders of the U-boat fleet came face to face with a new reality. The age of unseen warfare had begun, and those who failed to understand it would be left behind in history's wake. In war as in life, strength alone is never enough. The Second World War proved this more clearly than any conflict before it. Across continents and oceans, millions of men fought with courage and endurance. Yet time and again it was knowledge, not sheer force, that decided victory. The story of the German admirals examining a captured radar set captures this truth perfectly. It was not that their submarines were less skilled, or that their crews were less brave. It was that the Allies knew something they did not. The Allies understood the unseen, and that knowledge changed everything. At the height of the U-boat campaign, the German Navy believed it held an unstoppable weapon. The submarines could strike silently and vanish beneath the waves before the enemy could react. Britain's supply lines were threatened, and the morale of the Allied forces was tested daily. The German leadership believed that by cutting off Britain's imports of food, fuel, and weapons, they could starve the island nation into surrender. For a time, their plan seemed to be working. Convoy after convoy was destroyed, and the tonnage of Allied shipping sank at an alarming rate. The Atlantic had become a graveyard of steel and smoke. Yet beneath this grim surface, something was happening in laboratories and workshops across Britain and America. Scientists, engineers, and mathematicians were quietly waging a different kind of war, a war of intellect. They were searching for ways to overcome the invisibility of the U-boats, to pierce the darkness that hid them. The answer lay not in more ships or more guns, but in understanding how waves of energy could reveal what human eyes could not see. Radar was their triumph, a product of patient study, experimentation, and creative thought. It was born not on the battlefield but in the mind. When the German admirals finally saw a radar device for the first time, they were struck by how simple it looked. Just a box of wires, valves, and screens. Yet that small invention had rendered their vast submarine fleet vulnerable. It showed that wars are not only won by the men who fight them, but also by the people who think them. The Allies had out, thought their opponents. They had replaced fear with foresight and darkness with detection. The German belief that courage and firepower could dominate the seas was shattered by a scientific truth: information rules war. Knowledge gave the Allies control of time and space. With radar, they could act before the enemy could even react. Aircraft could detect submarines at night. Ships could locate incoming threats long before visual contact. And convoys could navigate around danger rather than sailing blindly into it. This new awareness turned chaos into coordination. The sea, once unpredictable and deadly, became a battlefield mapped by invisible lines of information. It was the power of knowledge that transformed defense into dominance. The Germans, by contrast, had underestimated the role of science. The Nazi leadership often placed more faith in ideology and instinct than in research. While their scientists were brilliant in many areas, from rocketry to engineering, their strategic command sometimes dismissed or delayed scientific projects that could have changed their fortunes. The radar race was one such case. Germany had its own radar programs, but they were fragmented and underfunded compared to the Allied effort. The Admiralty failed to grasp just how rapidly the British were advancing in radar and electronic warfare. That failure of understanding was as costly as losing a fleet. In every era, knowledge has been the true source of power. In ancient times, it was the knowledge of navigation that opened the seas. In the industrial age, it was the knowledge of machines that built empires. And in the modern world of the 1940s, it was the knowledge of physics and electronics that decided the fate of nations. The Allies realized this earlier and acted upon it with unity and urgency. They built networks of research institutions, encouraged collaboration between scientists and soldiers, and protected their discoveries with secrecy and precision. In Britain, the radar project known as Chain Home became a cornerstone of national defense. It was this organized pursuit of understanding, this belief that science could win wars, that gave them their decisive edge. Knowledge also had another kind of power, psychological power. When the Germans learned that the Allies could detect their submarines through radar, the myth of U-boat invincibility was destroyed. Fear shifted sides. The hunters became the hunted. U-boat crews who once believed they were invisible now sailed with anxiety, knowing that an unseen eye might be tracking them from above. Confidence, that invisible armor of war, began to crack. The Allied sailors, on the other hand, gained courage from their new tools. They no longer felt helpless against unseen enemies. They had information on their side. Knowledge became morale. It gave meaning to endurance and faith to effort. What makes this episode so powerful is that it mirrors a universal truth about human progress. Knowledge is not just a military advantage, it is the essence of survival. Every step of human advancement, from fire to flight, has come from the courage to understand. The radar that once hunted submarines later guided ships safely through fog, helped pilots land planes in storms, and paved the way for modern communication systems. The same principle that protected convoys in the 1940s became the foundation of civil aviation, weather forecasting, and even space exploration. When people learn, they gain control not only over the present but over the future. The German admirals, staring at that captured radar set, were witnessing the power of knowledge too late. They realized that wars are not simply contests of weapons, but contests of minds. It was not the Allies' superior ships or their numerical strength that doomed the U-boats, but their superior understanding of the unseen forces of nature. The lesson was clear: intelligence and curiosity are the true engines of victory. In the decades that followed, this idea reshaped military and civilian life alike. Nations invested in research, education, and technology, recognizing that the next great battles, whether against enemies, diseases, or disasters, would be won not by might but by insight. The radar story became more than a tale of wartime innovation. It became a symbol of human intellect prevailing over ignorance. And so, from that moment on, knowledge was no longer just a tool, it was power itself. It guided leaders to make wiser decisions, scientists to reach deeper into the mysteries of the world, and ordinary people to understand that progress is built not on destruction, but on discovery. The German admiral's realization stands as a timeless reminder that those who see first, understand first, and think first will always hold the true advantage, in war, in peace, and in the endless pursuit of human advancement. The story of the captured radar set is not only one of war and loss, it is also a story of transformation, the kind that turns destruction into discovery and conflict into creation. In the heat of battle, inventions are often born not out of ambition but out of necessity. The radar, conceived as a weapon of defense, eventually became a tool for peace, progress, and everyday life. It reminds us that even in humanity's darkest moments, the pursuit of knowledge can lead to light. During the Second World War, radar was a secret so closely guarded that few outside the military even knew of its existence. To the soldiers and sailors who depended on it, it was nothing short of miraculous. An invisible shield that revealed hidden dangers. It could detect planes through clouds, ships through fog, and submarines beneath the waves. It allowed the Allies to see in conditions where human vision failed. This ability changed the course of the war, helping to protect convoys, guide bombers, and save countless lives. But when the war ended, scientists and engineers faced a new question: what would become of this powerful technology now that the fighting was over? As peace returned, the true value of radar began to unfold. The same principles that had been used to detect enemy ships were soon adapted to guide civilian aircraft. Pilots could now fly safely through darkness, storms, and dense fog. Airports around the world began installing radar systems that tracked planes as tiny blips of light across glowing screens, ensuring that takeoffs and landings could occur safely even in the worst weather. What had once been a weapon of war became the guardian of human life in the age of air travel. From the skies, radar's influence spread to the seas. Merchant ships and fishing vessels began to use radar for navigation and collision avoidance. No longer would sailors rely solely on the stars or the horizon. Radar could show them other ships, land masses, and even dangerous icebergs hidden in the mist. It transformed the world's oceans from treacherous expanses into well-charted highways of commerce. The same technology that had once hunted submarines now guided explorers, scientists, and traders safely across the globe. One of the most profound legacies of radar was its role in the development of weather forecasting. Scientists realized that radar could detect not just solid objects, but also rain, snow, and storms. Meteorologists began using radar to track weather patterns, measure rainfall, and predict the movement of hurricanes and tornadoes. For the first time in history, humanity could see the atmosphere in motion. Farmers could plan their harvests, cities could prepare for floods, and entire populations could be warned before disaster struck. A technology born to find enemies beneath the waves now watched over people from above the clouds. The transformation did not stop there. The study of radar and its electronic systems led directly to advancements in communications and computing. The war had pushed scientists to miniaturize circuits, improve signal processing, and increase the speed of information transfer. These developments laid the groundwork for the digital revolution that would soon follow. The radar's demand for precision and reliability became the foundation for modern electronics, from radio and television to the birth of computers and satellites. In a very real sense, the radar that once protected convoys also helped launch humanity into the information age. Even medicine benefited from the legacy of radar. The same principles of wave reflection and detection led to the creation of technologies like ultrasound imaging. Doctors could now peer inside the human body without surgery, using echoes of sound instead of bursts of radio waves. Lives that would once have been lost to mystery could now be saved through early diagnosis. Once again, the invisible world revealed its secrets. This time not to win wars, but to preserve life. The moral transformation of radar mirrors a greater human pattern, the ability to take tools of destruction and turn them into instruments of progress. History is filled with such transformations. The rockets built to deliver bombs later carried astronauts to the moon. The nuclear research that fueled wartime devastation later powered cities and hospitals. Radar belongs to that same lineage, a symbol of how human creativity can rise above conflict. For the German admirals who first examined the captured radar set, it represented defeat, the reason their U-boats were disappearing into the depths. But in hindsight, that same device represented something far greater. It was proof of what human intellect could achieve when guided by curiosity. The Allies' mastery of radar was not just a victory of one nation over another, it was a victory of knowledge over ignorance, of science over destruction. In peacetime, that same spirit of innovation continued, not for dominance, but for the betterment of all. As decades passed, radar technology continued to evolve. It became faster, smaller, and more precise. Today, radar is everywhere, often unseen but indispensable, in airports guiding planes, in cars preventing collisions, in smartphones helping with navigation, and even in space telescopes mapping distant planets. The invisible waves that once swept across the Atlantic now stretch across the cosmos, helping scientists understand the universe itself. What began as a weapon of war became a bridge between humanity and the stars. This transformation also teaches a moral truth. The worth of knowledge is not determined by how it begins, but by how it is used. In war, radar served the cause of survival. In peace, it became a servant of progress. It saved more lives than it ever took. It united nations in scientific cooperation and reminded humankind that even the most dreadful inventions can, through wisdom and compassion, be turned toward good. When we reflect on that moment, when German admirals stood around a captured radar set, realizing why their submarines were vanishing, we see more than a scene of military revelation. We see the beginning of a new chapter in human history. It was a moment when knowledge escaped the confines of war and began its journey toward peace. The waves that once guided bombs now guide planes and ships. The signals that once hunted enemies now connect friends across the world. The echo of that discovery continues to shape our lives every day. The radar story, in the end, is not about machines or battles, but about the enduring power of human intelligence. It shows that progress often emerges from struggle and that every innovation, no matter how dark its origin, holds the potential to serve humanity. What began as a secret weapon in a world at war became one of the greatest gifts to a world striving for peace. From war to progress, from fear to understanding, the radar's journey mirrors our own story of learning, adaptation, and the unending pursuit of a better, safer world.